Are you tired of struggling with oxidizer monitoring in challenging waters? Introducing Pyxis Labs OxyPanel Plus, the revolutionary solution for water treatment professionals. This non-wet chemistry amperometric multi-parameter sensor measures oxidizer, pH, ORP, and temperature all in one platform. Say goodbye to reagents and constant maintenance. With automated flow control and a touchscreen display, OxyPanel Plus is the future of oxidizer monitoring. Water professionals deserve better tools, and Pyxis Lab delivers. Go to scalinguph2o.com/Pyxis. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/PYXIS. Pyxis, because water professionals deserve better. Your system deserves the best, and so do you. Thermal Fluid Technologies brings you Protocol heat transfer fluids. Formulated with their innovative no-pit inhibitors designed to keep your systems efficient and corrosion-free. Whether it's HVAC, food processing, or beverage applications, their glycol-based solutions deliver reliability where it matters most. Plus, with their comprehensive coolant testing program, you can rest assured knowing your system is always operating at its best. Discover the difference by going to scalinguph2o.com/TFT. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/TFT. Thermal Fluid Technologies, where performance meets peace of mind. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore, the host of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, if you thought we were out of the month of August and we were over with Legionella Awareness Month, well, we just couldn't help it. We have one more episode. I know we're not in August, but it is the next consecutive Friday that we are releasing this episode. So Nation, today is the last installment of the 2025 Legionella Awareness Month. And of course, that's become Legionella Awareness Month and Waterborne Pathogens Awareness Month. And the whole theme this entire month, plus today, is all around how do we challenge what it is that we know and how do we make that become better conversations with our clients so our clients can make better decisions. And I've been seeing the questions that you guys have been asking each other, the challenges that you guys have been doing with each other throughout the month of August. And I am thrilled with that because when we challenge what it is that we think we know and challenge it with new information and new technologies, well, we get better information and better technologies. And that is exactly what the Scaling Up Nation is doing. So thank you for all the people that have written into me and let me know some of the things that they are doing. Thank you for all the people that are writing in and let me know new guests to maybe interview on a regular basis on our regular shows or next year when we do Legionella Awareness Month. That is so helpful. And thank you for all the people that let me know that you are doing the very thing that we are trying to motivate everybody to do, which is having those conversations with your clients so they can make better decisions. We've had people tell us about that. We've had people tell us that their clients are able to make better decisions, or people that weren't able to make decisions at all are now able to make decisions because they have better information. Nation, it's all about sharing that information in a way that they can understand it. And the best way to do that is not only knowing how to share the information, but knowing how to ask questions around that information. And it's my hope that all of our guests this month, last month really, but also today, are able to help you learn new things, but also allow you to think, how am I going to convey this information to my client? And how am I going to ask better questions so that I know they have a good understanding on this information? And more important, they're able to act on this information when I'm not standing in front of them. Because after all, It's their equipment. They're the ones that have to make this decision. And if they're not making a decision, well, folks, that is a decision by default. And a lot of times we're now reacting to something rather than proactively planning for something. And I'm hoping that preventative rather than responsive is what we are all hoping and focusing for. And hopefully our guests over the last few weeks have been able to help you with that. Now, somebody that is always helping you look forward and challenging what it is that you think you know is our friend James McDonald. And here is a brand new What Do You Know?
Hello and welcome to What Do You Know? The game show where we find out what do you know about industrial water treatment, drop by drop. So pump up your brain, take out that test kit of knowledge, and prepare to answer this week's question on What Do You Know? Today's question is, does hydroxide alkalinity in a steam boiler water always equal 2P minus M? The answer is no, it is not always true, which may surprise some. I'll grant you that in most low to medium pressure boiler water applications, the 2P minus M relationship probably does hold true. When there are interferences to the P and M alkalinity tests, however, this equation does not hold true. Possible interferences include polymers, phosphate, and even neutralizing amines, which can increase the acid-absorbing ability of water. Also, the 2P minus M relationship only holds true when the P alkalinity is greater than 1/2 of the M alkalinity. You may be well served to run the barium chloride test for hydroxide alkalinity to help confirm the mathematical equation holds true for your system. I'm James McDonald, and thanks for playing along with us. Stay tuned for next week's episode of What Do You Know?
Thank you, James. And something I don't know if you know is we have a bunch of conferences and training seminars that are available to us simply by going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to the events page. And when you do, you're going to see things like the Smart Water Innovations Conference taking place in Reno, Nevada, October 7th through 9th. And this is hosted by the American Water Works Association and the Southern Nevada Water Authority. And we're going to have all the information about this conference on our events page. And of course, also during that exact same time, that is when we are going to be celebrating Industrial Water Week, October 7th through 11th. It's always the first full week in October. And Nation, it is my hope that you tune in each and every day that week, because we're going to have a brand new episode for you celebrating the theme of the day. We're going to celebrate Pre-Treatment Monday, Boiler Tuesdays, Cooling Wednesdays, Wastewater Thursdays, and then wrap it up with Career Fridays. We're going to have all sorts of new content for you, including a brand new Detective H2O each and every day with mystery guest voices. And we're going to play some fun games on social media to see if you can guess that mystery guest voice. They have all been on the podcast, so you need to guess and see if you can figure out who they are. I have been involved in the recording of all of them, working with James and the guest, and I will tell you, I love every single one of them. Detective H2O is one of my favorite things that James does. Of course, he does so many things. It's hard to have a favorite. I love all of them, but I just love that Detective H2O style learning. And Nation, I can't wait to share those with you each and every day during Industrial Water Week. Once again, that's October 7th through 11th. It's my hope is that you hashtag Industrial Water Week or IWW25 every single day to help celebrate with the entire Scaling Up Nation. Now, how would you do that? Simply get out your phone, take a picture in front of your favorite piece of pre-treatment equipment on Monday, and then hashtag that to Industrial Water Week or IWW25, and then you get to see all the other people in front of a water softener or a clarifier or whatever it is that they are in front of. And maybe you can interact with them, or maybe you can just browse and say, hey, there are a lot of people in this industry. That's pretty darn cool. And then on Boiler Tuesday, I know everybody has a favorite boiler. Take a picture in front of your favorite boiler. On Cooling Wednesday, well, maybe it's a chiller or a cooling tower. On Wastewater Thursday, you know you have your favorite DAF system out there that you want to take a picture in front of. And then on Careers Friday, there's so many companies out there that will do an industrial water treatment cake, and then they'll take a picture of that or their crew or however they're celebrating. Maybe they take a picture of them with their mentor, somebody that's taught them a tremendous amount in this industry. Or maybe you just take a picture of yourself and say, I love this industry, and these are the reasons why. I think that's one of the reasons that Industrial Water Week is one of my favorite weeks of the year, because I get to see all of you out there doing what makes this industry the best industry in the world. And that, of course, is you caring for this industry. So once again, those hashtags are Industrial Water Week or IWW25, and you can do both of them if you like. And the other conference that I want to mention, because I'm so excited about this, is the AWT's annual convention and expo taking place in Colorado Springs, Colorado, November 12th through 15th. Folks, this is one of my favorite conventions to attend. And as you know, AWT has declared that the Scaling Up H2O podcast is the official podcast of the Association of Water Technologies. So we're hoping to do all sorts of cool things with the AWT during this conference. So if you're a member of the Scaling Up Nation, make sure you're either wearing your button or you get a button from me. In fact, I would prefer you get a button from me. We order them in bulk. And folks, I don't want to carry them back with me. I carry them to you, and then I want to come back with a lighter load. So please come find me, come find a member of my team and ask for a button. Maybe you've got a couple people at home you want to take them to. We don't mind. We encourage it. Go ahead and get some buttons for them, because that reminds you to listen to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And that is your badge to let people know that you are a member of the Scaling Up Nation. I said on a previous episode that that's a great way to break the ice at a conference, is to walk up to somebody with another button and say, hey, I listened to that episode. What's one of your favorite episodes? Hey, you've just broken the ice and you've probably gained a new friend. We're trying to make that as easy as possible for you. So whatever conference that you're going to, make sure you wear that button. And if you don't have any, make sure that you grab one, especially at the AWT conference. And I will be happy to grab a picture with you if you like. I just love that you are listening and sharing this podcast. You know, something else I want to share about the AWT conference is we talk a lot about the convention. But if you are a business owner in AWT, mark your calendars for November 11th. November 11th is the business owners meeting. And if you go on the AWT website, or if you go to scalinguph2o.com and go to our events page, we'll put the information that we have to take you to the information on the AWT website about the business owners meeting. But you want to mark your calendars for that. They always have great speakers. I am always in attendance of those. They do some great things. And we, of course, have a lot of Rising Tide Mastermind members that attend that. And I want to make sure that you know about the Business Owners Conference. So if it's something you want to attend, you can protect that time and make arrangements to be there. Well, Nation, an organization like the Association of Water Technologies, but over in the UK, is called the Water Management Society. And because of the Association of Water Technologies, I got to meet one of their executives, Jemma Tennant, at last year's AWT conference. We had a great time talking, and then we decided, hey, wouldn't it be great if we just didn't talk? We actually put this on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. So, Nation, here is my interview with Jemma Tennant. My lab partner today is Jemma Tennant of SMS Environmental in the United Kingdom. Jemma, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you very much, Trace. I'm very pleased to be here.
We are pleased to have you. And my hope today is that all of our listeners are going to learn about maybe a different organization that they may not be familiar with. Maybe they are, and they'll learn a little bit more. But before we get there, do you mind sharing with the Scaling Up Nation a bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I actually live in Scotland, just a little bit south of Edinburgh, the capital. But I grew up in America. My dad was a vet, so I was born in Cambridge, England, and then moved over to Philadelphia. So I was actually in Philadelphia in 1976 when the first Legionnaire's disease outbreak happened. I don't remember it because I was too young at the time, but my parents remember it quite well. And they're also Bob Dylan fans. And there's a song about Legionnaire's disease, which is, I think, it's really, really awesome that they have, that he's wrote a song about it during the time and coming from the trees, the Legionnaire's disease. So I've always, it's always been part of my life, really. So then I moved back to the UK, to Scotland, when I was 15 and went to university here. Always had science as part of my upbringing because my dad, when he was a vet, he used to take us he did a research. So he's an immunologist and a dermatologist, and he used to drag us into the University of Pennsylvania vet school to help with, or the University of Florida. We moved to Florida after to help him with his experiments because we were cheap labor. So yeah, science has always been a strong part of my upbringing, coming from a family of scientists. So when I went to Edinburgh, I studied biology at university. And then I had a really great tutor who introduced me into these organisms called rotifers. Anybody hasn't heard of rotifers, they're fascinating creatures. They are used as indicators of water quality. So you can look at a body of water, and depending on what type of rotifers are there or how many are there, it gives you an indication of if you've got pollution and how much pollution you've got. So that naturally took me, because one of the things I was looking at for my dissertation was a wastewater treatment plant. And then that naturally took me into a career of wastewater treatment. And I've been in water treatment for the last 27 odd years.
So your education's always been around water. You're now in water. Obviously, you love water. So thank you for the dedication that you've given to water. And something that I wanted to ask you is, what are some of the differences that you notice when it comes to maybe regulations over here in the States to regulations over there in the UK?
Yeah, it's completely different. We are very, very Legionella focused over here and controlling it, and we have very strict legislation. I know in the States you have your ASHRAE 188, which is, from what I gather, it's guidance. It tells you what you should do, but it's not legal. Although if you're implicated in the event of if there's a Legionella outbreak and you haven't followed it, that could be used against it in the prosecution. But in the UK, we have the overarching Health and Safety at Work Act, which says we have a duty of care to protect employers and employees, visitors to the work premises at work. And we also have the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health, which is our COSH regulations, 2002. And Legionella is considered under the COSH regulations as well as duty of care to protect people in the workplace. So under COSH regulations, legally, if you have a chemical on site, you have to do a risk assessment on it, and you have to put control measures in place. For example, PPE and ventilation masks are required. Legionella is exactly the same. So it comes under that regulation. So we have to have a Legionella risk assessment, and then we have to put control measures in place. And if those control measures aren't followed, regardless of somebody gets sick or not, you could get prosecuted under breach of the Health and Safety at Work Act, 1974. So we had a really interesting case in November, an HSE prosecution to a housing association, Sanctuary Housing. It's in the news, so it's public knowledge. And there was a case where they had taken Legionella samples and they had Legionella positives. I think 44 samples they had were Legionella positives, but they weren't doing anything about it. And they were giving the wrong advice to the clients. For example, the tenants of the house, they were saying to them, fill your water basins up with water and you can drink the water, boil your kettle. But they didn't say they shouldn't be showering. So they were potentially exposing the clients to Legionella through showers, through aerosols, as we know that's how it's transmitted. So somebody had reported them to the HSC. They then got an inspection. They looked at their scheme of control and the things they were doing. They found that the risk assessments, the Legionella risk assessments, weren't suitably sufficient. They weren't monitoring temperatures, because in the UK, we have legally by law have to do monthly temperatures to make sure that the temperatures of the water was out with the ideal growth range. So below 20, above 50 for hot. And they weren't doing any of these. And despite the fact that nobody contracted Legionnaire's disease, they were fined £1.2 million for failing to manage under the legislation. And I think that's the main difference, is in America, it's guidance. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you wouldn't necessarily get HSC investigating your premises and fining you for not doing monthly temperature checks, because that's not actually a legal requirement. Is that right?
From my knowledge, there has to be an outbreak in order for people to get involved. In some places, like New York City, there are laws where you have to do certain things and you will get fined if you don't do those things. And more municipalities are following suit with that. But by and large with the country, it's exactly as you just mentioned it. Yes.
Yeah. So, but in the UK, we could just be fined a significant sum of money for actually not following legislation, regardless of somebody getting sick or not. So we're looking at the potential for harm, not the actual harm. So that's the difference. And we could be prosecuted for the potential of harm, even if nobody actually gets sick or harmed.
When I was over in Scotland, and you live in a beautiful place, oh my gosh, it was so amazing when we were there. I noticed when we were in hotels, there were stickers on all their ice machines stating that they had been inspected for Legionella. That's not something we do here in the States. I will say I enjoyed seeing that. I thought that that was a great step in the right direction. Obviously, we don't want anybody getting sick. But perhaps what you described maybe is going a bit too far. I don't know. People that are way smarter than me can figure that out. I do want to ask you, being over in the States, you knowing what you know, any advice of what we can be doing better?
I think if you look at the number of cases, I mean, obviously America's significantly larger than the UK, but the percentage of population. So I was looking at the statistics on the CDC. Unfortunately, I think they don't update them, so they're not absolutely current. But generally across the world, the cases are going up, but there's still not a great number of cases compared to the population. So I think we're looking at, in Europe, it's 9.9 cases per 100,000 population. And I think it's similar in America. So in the UK, we have very strict regulations, but a lot of water treaters will argue that it's a bit over the top. But the HSC view Legionnaire's disease as foreseeable and thus preventable. So they put legislation in place, and we're legally obliged to follow that legislation. But on the grand scheme of things, the number of cases we're seeing year on year, I mean, in Scotland in 2023, we had 54 cases, which isn't a great deal of cases considering the management and the monitoring that we have to do for organizations. And that's any organization with more than 5 occupants legally has to do monthly temperature monitoring, quarterly showerhead cleans, annual cold water storage tank inspections, chlorifier inspections. So there's a lot, weekly flushing on little used outlets. And if you're potentially putting somebody in harm's way, you could face significant fines. But are we controlling it better than you guys who have less strict regulations? Don't think we are, because we're still seeing cases.
The good thing is we're really looking at this now. Really smart people like yourself are giving recommendations, and I think we'll get better as it goes on. Not just in your country, not just in my country. I think there's so much more collaboration now between the different organizations over the world. Hopefully, we will land on something that not only makes sense, but it protects people.
So we've had the recent surveillance figures from both Public Health England and Public Health Scotland, and from the EU as well, because it's a notifiable disease, as it is in America. And I think their message is the same. Cases are increasing, and this is something that we're going to have to monitor and look at. And there's been a very obvious increase in cases over the last few years. Since COVID, we're seeing more cases year on year. So the message is that this is going to happen probably worldwide for a number of reasons, global warming, better surveillance, because we're checking it now. I mean, in Scotland, anybody who goes to the hospital who has, certainly in some areas, not every health board, but if somebody is diagnosed with pneumonia, then they will do a urine antigen test on them to see if it is Legionella, so they can rule that out. So we are testing more, but we also have things like the ambient temperatures getting warmer. So in some places in the UK, believe it or not, we have, in the summer months, we'll have temperature coming into our buildings 25, 26 degrees Celsius. Now I'll need to find out what that is Fahrenheit. a quick conversion, but our control level is 20. We need to try and keep our cold water below 20. So if we're having it coming into our building before we get natural heat gain as it enters the building, we're fighting a losing battle before we even start. So we also have the drive towards net zero, where we're trying to save energy, we're trying to reduce water use, we're trying to reuse water, which goes against everything that we're trying to do as water treaters, which is keep water moving, keep cold cold, keep hot hot, and keep it clean. So we've got a lot of challenges to face. So it's important that we do have some sort of legislation in place so we can make sure that we can control it. Because even though there's only 54 cases, people have died from Legionnaire's disease.
Yeah, here in the States, they're building a lot of new hospitals. And one of the big differences on how they've been building from years ago is there used to be a sink almost on every wall that you turn to so people could wash their hands. And they realized we're not getting good flow on these low use sinks. So we're just not putting them in anymore. And you now have to walk places to go wash your hands. It's going to be interesting to see how that impacts the population of the hospitals, as now that they're trying to make sure that we're getting better flow. We don't have low legs or stagnant legs where Legionella is just growing until that faucet turns on. Is the UK doing measures like that as well?
Absolutely, yes. Well, as you said, hospitals are one of the main sources for waterborne infections. In Europe, they're actually looking at waterless hospitals, certainly for the intensive care, augmented care wards. And yeah, we're building hospitals that have ensuite rooms in intensive care units, and you're not going to be able to use a shower if you're in intensive care. So we are looking at that. In Scotland, we seem to be a little bit more advanced than in our neighbouring country in England, but we have something called Scotland Ashore, and we now have tighter control over hospitals as just before they're even built. So we have water safety groups that will be involved in the design and the build of the hospital before a shovel even hits the ground, which is making a big difference. Because Florence Nightingale said in the 1800s, I know no class of murderers as much as hospital architects. so and it's one of the problems we're having is that people who are building hospitals, they're not thinking, unless they have adequate training, they're not thinking about building a hospital that is designed to not prevent it, because you can't prevent it in the bill, but is not designed to encourage bacteria growth in the water systems. And we have a lot of problems. I mean, I was doing an investigation into a Pseudomonas infected healthcare system and looking at the plumbing and the way that things were built. We had the problem at handover because of the way that they had not thought about aseptic techniques when they were building the hospital. There was a lot of not the right materials. They were using a lot of sort of plumber's putty. They were using too much of it. So there's all these little areas that the Pseudomonas, it was like, could grow. And then once you've got it in your system, it's really difficult to get rid of.
I'm curious, how different are water management plans in the UK versus in the United States?
Well, so for our water management plans, we call it the written scheme of control. But in healthcare, we have water safety policies, which are similar as well. So they're a little bit different, but we also have water safety groups. But at the moment, the water safety groups are only in hospitals. And I believe you guys will have a water safety group as part of ASHRA. They require you to have like a nominated water safety group, don't they?
I believe you're referring to ASHI, and I believe that's correct.
Yeah. So we have our water safety groups in hospitals will consist of infection control nurses, microbiologists, engineers, plumbers, cleaning technicians, and anybody who's designing, architects. And they all work together to ensure that any building is managed, or the way it's managed is managed in line with the requirements under the HTMO 401, which is slightly different. That's a healthcare specific one. So that will tell you materials of constructions to use. So it covers a wide variety of things that you need to do before you even build a new hospital. We don't have similar things for general buildings, for hotels and things like that, but we do have a nominated management structure, and then we have what we call a written control scheme. So when you have a Legionella risk assessment, it would make recommendations on how to manage the risk that's been identified, if there is a risk identified. And that forms the basis of the written control scheme. So that will tell you what you have to do weekly, monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly. And if you don't follow the written control scheme, you unfortunately get the health and safety executive knocking at your door, or the environmental health officer. Then you could be prosecuted under the Health and Safety at Work Act. Does that explain things? Like complicated.
It does. It does. And Nation, I really recommend that we look at our neighbors across seas just to see how they are doing things, to see what lessons learned that we can get from them so we can do a better job here in the States or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Jemma, I did want to ask, you are the chair of the Water Management Society. What exactly is that?
So the Water Management Society is very similar to the Association of Water Technologists, AWT. Obviously, it's a much smaller scale, but we have experts in various different fields. So we'll have experts in cooling water treatment, experts in steam boilers, experts in healthcare, and we all form the Water Management Society committee, and then members will join, and then they get access to, we have something very similar to the analyst. And I've been working with the wonderful Michael Henley to try and share articles as well, because we've got a whole host of past articles that we've had and analysts have. So rather than trying to share knowledge that way, they have a technical web page that they can ask questions to, and then people in the committee will get assigned that question, and so they support them. So we have a learning training center as well. It's called the practical training area, we call it the PTA, and it has a little miniature cooling tower so that we can bring candidates to our PTA and they can actually practically see the cooling tower and how it works. Because I think for training, that's really, really important. So they can actually see the practical side of things as well as sit in the classroom and learning. And it is to try and raise industry standards and to support people in the industry and help them on their water treatment journey. It's it's just like the AWT. I was fortunate enough to join you guys in Louisville, Kentucky last year. I thought it was amazing. Everything, the exhibition hall, the lectures, the presentations they had. We do something similar, but it's on a much, much smaller scale. But then we are a much smaller country. But it did give me a lot of inspiration. And yeah, one day maybe we could present something as grand as the AWT. But so as part of my role in the Water Management Society, because I was elected chair in June, so it's my first sort of 4 or 5 months as chair of the Water Management Society, I'm trying to work with you guys and also the Australian one, which is the Legionella Management Advisory Group, call it the LMAG, and trying to get a collaboration between the three, because I think there's so many amazing things that each group can bring to the table, and it's sharing that knowledge, isn't it?
Absolutely. When we can collaborate with each other, things get better. So if there's anything that we can do to assist with that endeavor, please let us know.
We will do. I'll definitely hold you to that, because I think, and certainly in the UK, we have a very, very strong legislation for managing Legionella from hot and cold domestic systems. But you guys are really knowledgeable on cooling towers and boilers, and there's so much more we could learn from you, and vice versa. And then you've got Australia; they've got Legionella longbeachy. That is most Legionella cases, most Legionnaire's disease cases in Australia and New Zealand are caused by Legionella longbeachy. And in Scotland, for some reason, we've seen increases in Legionella longbeachy infections as well. So we're hoping to learn from our colleagues across very, very big pond in Australia and more about this species of Legionella, because it's an emerging species of concern. It's very, very interesting and very different than Legionella pneumophila.
Can anybody join the Water Management Society, or do you need to be a resident in the UK?
Nope, anybody can join. You get, as I say, as a member, you get access to all our Waterline quarterly publication. We do a range of toolbox talks. Training might be difficult because I think we do online training, but most of it is in person in our practical training area in Tamworth. But no, anybody can join. And hopefully in future, we are discussing working with AWT and Water Management Society to see if we can give some sort of discount or incentive for you guys to join, because obviously you're part of the AWT already.
That's very interesting. And I love the abbreviation is WIMSOC. That's just fun to say.
WIMSOC, yeah.
Jemma, I understand that you are currently working on your CWT, so I want to be the first phone call you make when you get your CWT so I can congratulate you. A couple of questions around the CWT. One, how are you studying for it, especially since there are some American regulations on the CWT? And then a follow-up to that is, why is it valuable to have your CWT in the UK?
So was it episode 202 that John Sanford, my the founder of company SMS, who I work for, from the story is he was not bamboozled, that's not the right word, but persuaded by Angela Pike to do the CWT. So he did it, and I think he really saw the value in it. So he encouraged me to start my journey in the CWT, and hopefully when I'm ready, I'll be able to sit my exam and pass, though I think it's quite a difficult one to pass. And so John Sanford is teaching me. There's a group of us, and we meet up every couple months, and he starts from the basics. I think it's great. When I first joined in my water treatment career, I worked for a company called Houseman, who I think Colin Frayne, very well, worked for as well.
He's been on the show a couple times, yes.
Yeah, and he was Houseman. The training that Houseman offered was second to none, and I was very lucky to be a part of that. And I think from what John Sanford said, it's very, very similar. So you start from the basics. So my first training for the CWT was basic chemistry, the foundations. And if you don't know your basic water chemistry, then you're not really going to understand as you progress through your career. You're not going to understand the relationship between the chemistry of water when you're testing your cooling water to check that you've got optimal efficiency. So you start with the basics, and that's really important. And then you move on to pre-treatment. And it was very similar to the training I did for Houseman, but they don't do that now. There's very few water treatment companies will invest in their staff and give them that same level. So we need something. Now, Houseman doesn't exist anymore. It got bought up by Nalco, which I know you've Nalco, and now it's owned by Ecolab. So it doesn't exist anymore. So we've lost that training, and all the people most of the people in the industry did start from Houseman at one point. Colin Frame, I don't know if you know Mike Hunter, he's on the Water Management Society. So most people in the Water Management Society started off with Houseman, so they've had that fundamental training. But they're getting older, and we're losing a lot of that expertise. They're retiring, and then there's not that standard. So if I bring over the CWT over to the UK and have that as an option, and I'm hoping I can try and work with the Water Management Society, have that as an offering. I've spoken to I think a couple of people from the AWT, because we would need to. That is one of the things I'm struggling with during the course, is that the different units of measurements. And then also the Legionella section, you've got different regulations than we do. So I'm hoping I can work with the AWT to try and get an equivalent for the UK that's the same as the US in every way, apart from units of measurements, which confuses people over here. And also just that section that you have on the legislation for Legionella. So ours is a lot different than that. So for me, I think that would really help in bringing back some of that traditional, strong learning for people in the water treatment industry, certainly for the new ones coming in. And it will stop us from losing that knowledge.
I think that's great. Anything I can do to help you with that endeavor as well, I am at your service. I think the more people that know about the Certified Water Technologist worldwide, the more weight it carries, and I think it elevates the bar on the entire water treatment community.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's brilliant. As I say, I am struggling with it because my brain isn't as young as it used to be. But I think for me, it's a reminder, because I've had similar training before, but it covers everything. And at the end of it, you will end up being a perfect water treater, because that's what it's designed for, because it covers everything that you need to know. And I say, if you don't have that foundation, the very, very back to basics, the first part of the training, if you don't have that foundation, then you're going to be struggling. You might understand how to do things, but you're not going to have that in-depth understanding. It's like when we take on new people to service cooling towers, to look after them, to do the checks and things like that. You can read a manual to tell you how to do a titration or a drop test or a photometer test, but it's understanding what to do with the results. And I think that's what we're missing, is that interpretation that we're missing, because they're not getting that level of training.
I like to say it's the transition between just doing the task to understanding the why behind the task.
Exactly that.
Jemma, where do you see the future of water treatment going?
Well, I'm hoping that during my time as chair of the Water Management Society, I'm not going to complete it, but I can start that drive towards improving industry standards, regulating them better, because we have a Legionella Control Association over here, which again, most people in the water treatment industry have to be a member of, and they set standards how you're supposed to carry out certain tasks, which are the code of conduct, which you're to follow. So we have UCAS, and I know America has ANAB, but we don't. They're all good for regulating the industry, but they're not perfect. So I would like to make it better. So drive industry standards up. At the moment, we're seeing, sadly, a race to the bottom. We're seeing a lot of water treatment companies coming in thinking that it's really easy to do, seeing they can make potential money on it by going out and cleaning a cold water storage tank, but not actually doing it properly, which is, which is causing a lot of potential risks for us, for Legionella cases. So I really want to try and drive that industry, the industry standard, and the Legionella awareness and the knowledge back up again.
Jim, if you don't mind sharing with us some of the organizations that you mentioned over in the UK, specifically the Water Management Society, we'll make that available on our show notes page so that way people can log on and learn more about everything that we've been talking about today. I would like to ask you a few lightning round questions if you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my first lightning round question. Jemma, if you could go back in time and talk to your former self on your very first day as an industrial water treater, what advice would you give yourself?
I think don't be afraid of knowledge. When I first started, my biggest fear was coming across a customer that knew more than I did. And I was terrified of them. But I always had the philosophy where if I don't know the answer, I would say that I don't know the answer, and I would go away and look it up. And that way, that's how I learned. Now, the most terrifying thing in the industry is having a client that doesn't know anything. So there's before I was terrified of ones that did. Now I'm terrified of ones that don't.
I love that answer. What are the last few books that you've read?
The last one I just finished was The Women by Kirsten Hanna. And it was about a nurse who served during the Vietnam War. And I would really recommend it. It was very, very interesting.
Well, they're making a tremendous amount of movies here in the Atlanta area. So when they hear this podcast, someone's going to write a script about Jemma Tennant's life. Who do you want playing Jemma?
Has to be somebody really smart. Somebody really intelligent. I don't know. I've got dark hair, so let's go for somebody like Sandra Bullock.
There we go. Great choice. She would be lucky to get that part. My final question, if you had the ability to speak with anybody throughout time, who would it be with and why?
My granddad, because I never met him. He died before I was born. But my dad was born in Jersey, and during the occupation, when the Germans occupied Jersey during the World War II, my granddad sent his family away for safety, and he stayed behind to serve as a surgeon. So he worked in the hospitals during the occupation. So I would just love to meet him and find out what it was like.
Well, Jemma, I want to thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. We always learn so much when we're able to collaborate with our partners in other countries. And I want to thank you. I know you're an avid listener of the podcast. So thank you for spreading the Scaling Up Nation across the pond.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, Jemma, once again, thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. We, of course, talked a little bit about Legionella on this podcast. So this wraps up Legionella Awareness Month for the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, there was so many things that we referenced on this podcast. I wanted to make sure that I mentioned some of the things we talked about so you can go and research them. So Colin Frane's episode was episode 101, and I believe that was a two-parter. Colin Frane is fantastic, and he literally has written the book on industrial water treatment. In fact, he's written 3. I own all 3 of them. So if you want to listen to Colin, that's episode 101. And then John Sanford came and spoke with us on episode 203, and we learned all things that they were doing in the UK for hopefully us here in the States and other places around the world to learn from that. And then we heard from one of their colleagues, Lee Bainbridge, episode 370, where he was telling us about some things that are going on as well in the UK. She also mentioned Mike Henley. Mike Henley is the editor of The Analyst, and he is fantastic. He does the AWT's Analyst magazine. And he and I are working together to bring you even more content from the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And we'll have even more references from things that we talked about on our show notes page. By the way, if you ever listen to an episode and you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't keep up, don't worry, we don't expect you to. That's why we do show notes. That's why we create resources for you to maybe get in the know by listening to the podcast and then really advancing your knowledge by going to the show notes, maybe downloading the discussion guide, having a discussion with your team, looking at some of the different papers and things that our guests reference on our show notes. Folks, this is your conduit to challenge any and all things that you know, and that's been one of the themes during Industrial Water Week. And of course, the main underlying theme is how do you learn more so you can have better conversations with your team so your customers can ultimately make better decisions. It's my hope that this entire month has been able to open that door for you, that you've had some successes already, and you're going to continue having successes because as a water treater, you are a constant learner. And because you're consistently learning new things, you know how to have better conversations. And because you know how to have better conversations, your customers are making better decisions. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll come back with you next week with a brand new episode. Take care. Join the Rising Tide Mastermind. Discover a community where passionate professionals come together to support each other's growth. Be part of a tribe that celebrates your wins and helps you overcome challenges. Don't navigate your journey alone. Find your community with us, the Rising Tide Mastermind. To find out more about the Rising Tide Mastermind, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Find out if the Rising Tide Mastermind is right for you.